Subedar Rab Nawaz understood one thing. They were fighting to win Kashmir. Why did they need to win Kashmir? Its annexation was vital for the survival of Pakistan. But as he took aim to shoot, and a familiar face appeared on the opposite side, he forgot for a moment why they were fighting, why he had lifted his gun and aimed. Whereas before, they had fought together against a common enemy, whom they had merely imagined to be their enemy for the sake of their stomachs and rewards and recognition. Now they had themselves split into two groups. They were no longer Indian soldiers, but Indian and Pakistani soldiers. The thought that there were still Muslim soldiers back in India flummoxed his mind, and when he thought about Kashmir, his mind became even more muddled. It just refused to think farther.
The battle for control over the road that led from Muzaffarabad to Kiran had been raging along the banks of the Kishanganga for some time. It was a strange battle. At night, rather than the sound of bullets, a crescendo of abuses, each one smuttier than the last, rose from the neighboring hills. At first, when he heard the provocative insults, Rab Nawaz thought of throwing himself headlong into the fray, but decided to hold back. His men could not hold back for very long. Soon they had had enough and began returning the enemy's noxious abuse with their own equally insulting invectives at the top of their lungs. It was a peculiar battle for Subedar Rab Nawaz. He tried a few times to restrain his men, but profanities got so vicious, it wasn't possible to hold back.
On the hill occupied by the Subedar's contingent, the slope provided no cover, as it was completely without trees or bush. It was obvious the attack would be quite hazardous, but his men, chomping at the bit to get even for the blustering obscenities hurled at them, were more than willing to go for it anyway. As it turned out, they were successful. Their losses included 2 men dead and 4 wounded. The enemy lost 3 men and the rest took their heels, leaving their provisions behind. Firing continued for a while. Eventually, he ordered his men to save their ammunition and shot only when the enemy made a move and was exposed. Just then, he noticed his naked body and muttered under his breath, "God damn it! Without the clothes, a man looked like an animal."
Brought the binoculars to his eyes and peered through them again. He couldn't see anyone in the sparse, swaying vegetation on the hill. He cupped his hands round his mouth again and blared. "Who is it? This is Rab Nawaz. Rab Nawaz." And this Rab Nawaz also kept bouncing off the rocks. "Pig's ass," he muttered again. Instantly, a voice boomed. "It's me. It's Ram Singh." Rab Nawaz jumped as if he wanted to leap over to the other side right away. "Ram Singh?" he first said to himself, and then he screamed at the top of his lungs, "Ram Singha! Hey you, Ram Singh, pig's ass!" Before Pig's ass had time to crash against the hills and disappear altogether, Ram Singh's cracking voice shot up. "You potter's ass!"
Rab Nawaz was a potter by caste. His blood boiled whenever anyone even vaguely hinted at his origins. Only with Ram Singh, it was different. Rab Nawaz didn't let it get on his nerves with him because Ram Singh was a special chum of his. They had grown up in the same village and were born only a few days apart. Not just their fathers, even their grandfathers had enjoyed close, friendly ties. Rupnavas and Ram Singh had gone to the same primary school and enlisted in the army on the same day. In the last Great War, they had fought side by side on several fronts. Ram Singh's loud laugh shot through the air. Rupnavas had his gun aimed in the direction of the enemy and let it go off playfully. A scream tore through the air. He quickly peered into the binoculars and saw a man rise and hobble out from behind the stone bulwark, doubled over. Holding his stomach, the man crumbled to the ground after going a short distance. It was Ram Singh. Ram Singh was lying on the rocky ground in a pool of blood, groaning. He had been hit in the stomach. A gleam appeared in his eyes when he saw Rupnavas. Smiling, he said, "You potter's ass, you did this! Whatever for?" Rupnavas felt as if he was the one who had been shot in the stomach and was now writhing in agony. He smiled, bent over Ram Singh, and started to unfasten his belt. "Pig's ass! Who asked you to stand up?" As his belt was loosened, Ram Singh cried out from intensity of the pain. Rupnavas examined the wound. It was nasty.
And then he went down the memory lane, talking about their childhood, their village, stories of their school time, their time in 6x9 Jet Regiment, jokes about their commanding officers and their affairs with strange women in the foreign lands. And during one lucid moment, he asked Rupnavas, "Yeah, tell me honestly, do you people really want Kashmir?" Rupnavas replied in all earnestness, "Yes, Ram Singha, we do." "No, I can't believe it. I think you people have been taken for a ride." "No, I think it's you people who've been taken for a ride," Rupnavas said emphatically to convince him. Major Aslam, the platoon commander, came with some of his soldiers a little before sundown, but there was no medic with him. Floating between semi-consciousness and throes of death, Ram Singh was babbling about something, but his voice was so weak and broken that it was difficult to make out his words. Major Aslam, who had also been part of 6x9 Jet Regiment, knew Ram Singh quite well. He had Rupnavas tell him all the details about what had transpired, and then he called out, "Ram Singh! Ram Singh!" Ram Singh looked at him and came to attention, still lying on the ground. And with great difficulty, he raised his arm and saluted. For a moment, he looked at Major Aslam closely, and then his rigid arm fell limply to his side. And then he started to murmur in visible irritation, "Oh, Ram Singh, you pig's balls, you forgot this is a war, a war." But he could not finish. With his slowly closing eyes, he looked at Rupnavas with bewilderment. And then he turned cold.